Welcome to the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. Matt Zemek, Ethan Inman, Crashlet Collier, USC Oregon for all the Tostitos. A big game, so USC able to get over the finish line against Iowa and make this game a mega event. ESPN College Game Day will be in Eugene, and a lot to talk about that storyline. How USC matches up with Oregon. Is this USC's best team under Lincoln Riley? Ethan Inman's written about that. Maava, Dante Moore, so much to talk about. So we're gonna get to all the subplots, all the plot points, but we start with just the general overview. Your first thoughts about this game, Ethan, then Crash.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so excited that we're here. You know, I talked about this a little bit on Sunday in the post-game show after the Iowa game. It's just real refreshing to be playing for, basically a playoff berth in mid-November. We would hope, which I'm sure we'll get into some of the nuances of that later in the show, and I wrote about that today at Trojans Wire as well. There's some people who doubt that USC will even make the playoff if they win this game this Saturday, which would be a real tragedy. And like I said, I'm sure we'll get into that. But yeah, I mean, it's refreshing to have such a meaningful game against such, one of USC's biggest rivals, and, to have quieted some narratives this season, to have some momentum going into next season. And I'm just excited. And, my excitement is still a bit tempered. Like I know better than anybody the crushing disappointments of Lincoln Riley in ranked road games at USC. Still hasn't won a ranked road game. I believe he's 0-6 in ranked road games. Outside of the city of LA, his only ranked road win is against UCLA in 2022. So, that's still a piece of the puzzle that we have to put together here. The only two losses this season are also both ranked road games. So, I mean, USC and Lincoln Riley have overcome a lot of obstacles this year in terms of getting some of those big Big Ten wins at home, winning the Big Ten way with good, offensive line play, good defensive line play, playing really well in the trenches. But, and they won a pretty tough, pretty big road game up in Nebraska and Lincoln, but they've yet to grab the elusive ranked road win. So, the things that we've overcome this year give me hope for it. The history makes that hope kind of tempered, and we'll see. But overall, like big picture, I'm just excited to even be here and even be talking about this game with the excitement that it has.
I think, it's a super exciting game, especially when you consider the storylines. Game day is going to be there, like you said, Matt. And then also from just doing my research, watching the CFP selection rankings tonight from the selection committee, and then also going on the Sports Chat 503 podcast hosted by Ryan Winter up in Oregon last night. It kind of seems like this very much has the feel of an elimination game, just even with Oregon just having one loss. And just especially as they talked about, if Oregon loses, they could be pushed to the back of the two-loss train. And just combined with they've only really their one win against a ranked team, or their one opportunity against a ranked team currently in the CFP's rankings, they lost, and it wasn't even as close as the score says it was. So it really just, especially I've come around to just realizing that it's a do or die game. And it seems like, while it's not necessarily guaranteed that the winner makes it, and then obviously that goes with the assumption they win their final game against either UCLA in USC's case or Washington and Oregon's case, that the winner is going to get in. But it really just, for the loser, it seems like kind of regardless of, even with Oregon's just would be staying at two losses, I'm really excited that it just has that feel, just this elimination game for both sides. So I'm really just excited to see just how USC comes out and plays, kind of just knowing that they're facing elimination, but there's a very high likelihood, it seems like, from just everyone. The temperature up in Eugene seems to be, if we lose this game, we're out as well. So that's kind of what makes it really exciting for me.
Yeah, we are recording this Tuesday. Of course, we come on at 7 p.m. in the West every Tuesday during the season. So this is right after the rankings reveal. And it's so tempting to dive into the ins and outs of the playoff ranking. But you know what? block out that noise. USC has to block out that noise, because if you don't win, it don't matter. It is completely irrelevant. So I would love to be here next Tuesday as we prepare for the ruins to be discussing playoff scenarios. But right now, like, hey, Ethan, Crash, you can talk about it if you want to. I'm not. It's win the game. You pack your bags. You go up there for that business trip to the Willamette Valley, and you get a W, and then we can talk. That's my view. Do you think that the playoff is like it's just idle speculation? Like, is there anything to add to just the playoff rankings and that part of the conversation? Any early thoughts on how that dynamic is going to work, Ethan, and then Crash?
I mean, something I wrote about today at Trojans Wire is just this idea that the 10-win SEC and Big Ten teams are going to get really crowded potentially, based on how the rest of the season shakes out. And it's not, perfect science, because you still have to play these football games, obviously. Like, Oregon still has to play Washington. That's not going to be a gimme game. There's plenty of other teams in the SEC as well that have some tough final games. So, but it's shaping up to be a really crowded 10-win thing. And so there's a lot of discussion this week about, who gets in, if there's because there could be up to, I think, 6 SEC teams that finish with 10 wins, and then 5 Big Ten teams that finish with 10 or more wins. So, you can't put all 11 of them in the playoff, obviously. You're going to have to, because there's all the automatic bids. You have to put an ACC team in there. You have to put at least one Big 12 team in there. And I think there's a potential they put 2 in. And you have to put at least, one group of 5 team in there. So I don't know. I think the one thing that I would take out of that discussion right now, because like you said, Matt, it doesn't really matter if we don't win. But I think what Crash said is really important about this is kind of an elimination game for Oregon too, because you could look at it as, well, USC may have more pressure on them because, it's an elimination game for them. But Oregon, if they lose, they could probably still make it in. Not so fast, because this picture is getting really crowded. And like Crash said, a USC win over Oregon puts Oregon behind USC. And then if we're looking at one of those situations where, there's 6 SEC teams with 10 wins and 5 Big Ten teams with 10 wins, Oregon probably loses out on the playoff, because USC has the head-to-head win over them. USC also has the head-to-head win over Michigan. So, it's automatic, basically, Ohio State, Indiana, USC. And then it's possible that they pick 5 of the 6 SEC teams to make it in. So, like Crash said, I think, Oregon has an equal amount of pressure on them as USC has on them to win this game, because, Oregon needs to silence any doubt that they're a playoff deserving team, because that could come up if USC beats them here, because again, head to head is kind of the one clear thing. Like, if you determine that you're a better team than the other team on the football field, you obviously deserve a higher ranking than them. So that's kind of the only surefire way for a team to be ahead of another team. And so that's why Oregon kind of has to really be worried about this one as well, I think.
Well, I think for both teams, it's kind of a bit of a worry, especially because it's kind of really seems like there can be a lot of 10-2 teams. And I mean, obviously, I think Steve Sarkisian was kind of last week with Texas trying to say, 9-3 teams should get in. He kind of seemed to be anticipating that his 9-3 Longhorns should be getting in over someone else. Now they got completely walloped by Georgia, and I don't think they got a chance now with all the 10-2 teams, especially in their own conference, ahead of them. So really, I think it's interesting that even some of these 10-2 teams, kind of the general consensus was, kind of seemed to be just from everyone was, you got maybe 2 losses. The big word in there is maybe, as an at-large. So I think really we're starting to see this situation where a bunch of these teams might not lose out, and it's going to create some problems for both USC or Oregon, regardless of what their records are, especially if they both wind up 10-2. So I think it's just really interesting. And it was especially interesting reading an article by Blake Topmeyer in USA Today titled "Lincoln Riley Can Burn Down This College Football Playoff, Grab the Matches." And he basically talks about all these 10-2 teams. A few of them are going to get crowded out. And it's basically going to now cause everyone to want expansion sooner. So I just think it's really interesting how just this playoff thing, we're thinking, 10-2 should be good, might not be, regardless of who you are and how well you've played.
So that drama is going to sort itself out over the next couple of weeks, and what USC can just deal with what it can control, what's in front of the Trojans this Saturday in Eugene. We're going to get into the matchups. We're going to get into the players, the keys, all of that. But the other obvious, non-gridiron story is ESPN College Game Day. It's been a bit. It's been a while since a USC game's been on game day. Lincoln Riley had some very, very strong, notable, eye-opening comments. Ethan, you wrote about that at Trojans Wire. Let's walk everybody through that.
Yeah, so Lincoln Riley basically said, and this is not word for word, so don't quote me on this, but he basically said he doesn't really care that, USC is going to be on College Game Day, and he's not putting any emphasis on that with his players this week. He's not, trying to hype that up to the players or, make that a reason why they need to perform better. Because it's the same guys that kind of thought that USC was going to suck, is what he said. And he hasn't forgotten that. I wrote about that at Trojans Wire, and I also wrote about just kind of College Game Day's general disrespect of USC for the last decade or so. Last time USC was on game day was 2016 when USC went up to play Washington. And I would say that was definitely more about Washington than it was about USC, because Washington was, on the way to making the college football playoff. USC was a 3-loss team at that point. And the Trojans just happened to take advantage of that opportunity and win that football game. And kind of USC's last complete road win in, for a while, because it's been a while since we've had a win that satisfying on the road. Obviously Sam Darnold and Adoree Jackson leading the Trojans to that one. But and then it's been since 2013 since game day was at USC. And again, I think that was more about Stanford than it was about USC, because I think Stanford was more highly ranked at that time. Again, USC pulling that one out and taking advantage of that opportunity. But and there's been, honestly, I think, in my opinion, plenty of opportunities for game day to visit USC during the Lincoln Riley era, especially in 2022. I mean, it kind of still stings that they didn't come to USC, UCLA, and even that Notre Dame game was an opportunity there. I think that there were even a couple of opportunities sprinkled in 2023 and 24 at the beginning of the season when hype was still high, like that Notre Dame game in 2023, the Michigan game in 2024, even the Notre Dame game this year, I think, was a good opportunity that they missed on. So they just haven't really paid attention to Lincoln Riley-led teams too much. And so I think that, not only is it about him remembering this year and, USC coming into the year unranked, a lot of the game day hosts picking against USC in their biggest games, including against Nebraska and against Michigan. So, yeah, I mean, the disrespect has definitely been there. Lincoln Riley's not just talking out of his butt. It did happen. It'll be interesting, I think, to see if there's any retaliation or response from the game day hosts, because, McAfee and those guys, a lot of them are pretty outspoken, Herb Street. So I'd be interested to see if they kind of fire back at all or, pick against USC or, but it's just more bulletin board material if they do. So, and obviously Lincoln Riley isn't going to be, at least so he says, mentally affected by it. And he's not going to tell the team about it or, focus on that either. So I don't know, get your popcorn ready for game day next Saturday morning for sure.
Yeah, Crash, before I let you get your crack at this, just Lincoln Riley saying, hey, these guys are doubting us. So game day doesn't care about us. We don't really care about them. Like, do you think that chip on Lincoln Riley's shoulder makes you think about this Oregon game in a slightly different way and as part of the ESPN game day storyline?
Well, Matt, you bring that up, and I think Ethan nailed it perfectly on the head when he said it's bulletin board material. And I think what Riley was talking about, obviously he was just talking about just the disrespect kind of from game day, but that can be interpreted in just this picture of just this whole season, if you really think about it, Matt, because USC started the season unranked, and there were definitely arguments they should have been ranked. And I think Cody Kessler said it best on the Victory podcast when he's like, you know what? Just who cares? Doesn't matter. You win, the rankings take care of themselves. Use it as fuel. Use it as motivation. And I think that's what Riley's trying to portray here. Just every time USC's been disrespected, been thrown out of the polls, hasn't gotten the game day or appearances, or even Big Noon for that matter, Big Noon kickoff appearances for that matter, that they, I think, have warranted over Riley's time since he took over USC. I think it really just shows that, you know what? It's just another time they're disrespecting us. They're finally coming around. Who cares? Let's go show them what we're about. So I really just like that he's kind of just keeping with that theme of just USC's been disrespected this year, and they're about to go prove a bunch of doubters. So I really like the tone that he's taking here this week with what he said in that statement with regards to game day.
All right, as we begin to get into this game, let's first take one last look back at Iowa. And a lot of times in sports, obviously the goal is to win, but sometimes the way that you win carries extra resonance. It shapes your next game. It shapes the big games in certain ways that, if there was a different path to victory against Iowa, if it had been a more pedestrian, normal, smooth ride, maybe we're talking about this game in a different way. But the fact that USC was able to climb from 14 points down and pitch a shutout in the second half and show so much toughness and do so without Kamari Ramsey, without Bishop Fitzgerald, without Elijah Page, like that certainly can build a lot of belief in the locker room. So it's not as though USC just dominated start to finish and it was, hey, this is what we expect. No, it was, wow, everything was against us, and we found a way anyway. And maybe that is what can get this team over the hump. It can get this team to have a level of belief that we haven't seen since 2022 at Lincoln Riley's USC. Did the way USC beat Iowa meaningfully change the way you're looking at this Oregon game? Ethan, then Crash.
Yeah, I mean, I think the injuries are a really important part of the calculus because, we aren't 100% sure. And, it's tough with a lot of the college football head coaches nowadays and how just kind of airtight they keep their injury updates. But we're not 100% sure that USC is going to have those guys back for this game. It sounds like Kamari Ramsey out of everyone is the most healthy and going to be the most ready to go. And it sounds like, Wayman Jordan was questionable going into the game. It sounds like they'll be without him probably, barring, unless Lincoln Riley's kind of trying to make it seem like Wayman Jordan's not going to be healthy to kind of, put Oregon off his scent, which is possible. I wouldn't rule it out, to be honest with you. But, that kind of depth and that resilience through depth has been really a hallmark of USC this season. That I think coming into the year was a concern, especially at some key positions, especially in the secondary. I think at running back, we kind of knew that there was a lot of talent, but we didn't know who was going to kind of separate themselves. And I think if, you told us at the beginning of the season that Waymo and Eli Sanders were both going to get hurt, we would have been really concerned. Just not really knowing what Maava was going to be. The hallmark of this team has been when, things don't go right or guys get hurt and new guys need to step up, people are stepping up and people are playing well. And that's true of King Miller and Kalon Miller. It was true of Kennedy Urlacher this weekend. So I think that, that inspires confidence in this team being able to kind of find a way to stay competitive in this game, even if, things don't go perfectly well. I think that, what was concerning in their losses earlier in the season is that, Illinois they couldn't stop Illinois on offense at all. And then, you get to the Notre Dame game, and the most frustrating thing about the Notre Dame game was CJ Carr was not playing well. And it wasn't because USC was playing incredible defense on CJ Carr. It was just that he wasn't good, and USC didn't adjust, and they didn't figure out how to stop the run and make CJ Carr throw the ball. They just had Jeremiah Love run all over them, which Jeremiah Love's a great player, but at the same time, if he's the only one burning you, you kind of have to figure out how to take him out of the game. And so I think, with the halftime adjustments that we've seen all the last 3 weeks on defense, especially, and just the culture that we've seen come out when, guys that are walk-ons or freshmen or other players that, are low on the depth chart have to come in and are pressed into service, and they perform pretty well and pretty admirably. I think that makes me feel a little bit better because, that was an issue in the losses. And so if that's an issue that's been resolved now and they know how to make adjustments, at least at halftime, then, I feel a little bit more confident in us being able to remain competitive, at least until the end. Maybe not as much winning, but remaining competitive for sure.
Well, I think with this game, I think there's obviously, like you said, Matt, last few games, especially that Iowa game, USC's pitched a shutout. And I'm not worried about how they do in the second half or what the halftime adjustments are made. You got to do all that anyways. What concerns me about this game is the first half. If USC opens the first half like they did in some of these last few games, Nebraska, Northwestern, most glaringly and most concerning against Iowa, I'm worried that this game could get out of hand quickly. And it might not matter how well USC plays in the second half. It could just not be enough for them to come back. So really for me, I think the big thing is USC's got to be able to come out starting strong and be competitive early to even have a chance. So that way, if they do turn it on in the second half and play pretty flawless with the adjustments that are made in the locker room during the break, that they're able to actually remain in the game for its entirety and not just be trying to play catch up the entire second half. So that's where I'm most concerned is how does USC look in the first half? Because the USC we have seen in the first half, the last 2 games, is 3 games with all those wins, has not been pretty. So USC needs to really figure that out quickly if they want to have a shot at not just winning, but just competing with the Ducks on Saturday.
All right, was going to go there, so let's kind of follow up on that particular point. What needs to happen for this team to kind of shake itself out of that habit of, the first 20 minutes have been very poor the last several weeks, and it's just that notion of playing with fire. You keep doing that, you're bound to get burned. How does this coaching staff guard against that? Is there something that USC needs to do early, offense and defense, to shake things up, to try and land the first punch, or at least, to stay in it against Oregon's offense? Like Ethan, I'm thinking on defense, load the box, dare Dante Moore to throw down the field, take away the run, because like Oregon was able to run even though Dante Moore wasn't throwing the ball well against Iowa. He finished with something like 113 yards passing, and Oregon was running consistently. It didn't lead to a dynamic passing game for Oregon. So I think on defense, loading the box, and then on offense, I think you want to get Mekhi Lemon a chance to make a splash play early. He's flying high coming off that epic Iowa game. I think hitting Oregon with a jab would really quiet the Autzen crowd. But your thoughts on what USC needs to do to solve this puzzle of the first 20 minutes? Didn't get off to a good start at Illinois, as well as Nebraska, Northwestern, Iowa. Like, we've seen this a lot. How does this coaching staff solve this particular puzzle?
Yeah, so just want to give a quick shout out to Bob Springer. He's on the Royal Princess, and he's still joining us tonight for the Voice of College Football. So thanks, Bob, for being here and making us part of your night. Anyways, back to Oregon. I think that, and it's interesting because I think that there's kind of 2 different schools of thought for if USC wins the coin toss. I'm going to start there. I'm going to start with the coin toss. I think that, USC being a stronger team on the offensive side of the ball, you would think like, if USC wins the toss, they should, elect to receive. And that way, they can kind of set the tone by getting off to a quick 7-0 start or something like that. I'd actually like to see them do the opposite if they win the toss. I think that they should defer and put the defense on the field first, because of how the last few weeks have gone, because it's taken them a little bit longer to get going, because, they've been a second half team. I think that that's twofold. I think that allows you to have the possession coming out of this, coming out of the locker room in the second half in your back pocket, just in case things go similarly as they have the last couple of weeks. But I think, you don't frame it like that to your team. You frame it as, hey, we're confident in our defense. We're going to put our defense on the field first, and they're going to set the tone for us. They're going to send the message. We're going to get them, kind of into the groove earlier, and just, just kind of get them firing on all cylinders. so that, that confidence can get going very, very early. So it's a bit unconventional, but I'd kind of like to see them do that.
I just want to jump in quickly. Lincoln Riley usually likes taking the ball, does he not?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why it's a bit unconventional. But I'd like to see them do that potentially. And then I think like what you said about loading the box, I agree. Dante Moore is really inconsistent. And, he's got a lot of talent. But I don't think he's better than Jaden Mayava in general. And I also think he's really inconsistent. Like you said, it wasn't great against Iowa. 13 to 21 for 112 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. So he has bad games. His highs are very high, but his lows have been lower than Mayava, and he doesn't play as consistently as Mayava either. So, I think force him to beat you. And you know what? Like if you load the box early and you try to slow down Oregon because they rush for they have 3 guys who've rushed for over 400 yards this year, and they average 6 yards a carry. Like if you try to slow down the run game and that works, but then Dante Moore beats you and, starts out by throwing a couple long touchdowns, then you adjust. But I think you make him do that because he is less likely to be on, I think, than Oregon's running game, which has been pretty dominant all year long. And they're so deep that if you kind of contain one of their running backs, they'll just go to another one. They'll just go to another one. So I think making Oregon beat you in the pass on defense is really smart. And then on offense, yeah, I mean, it's just hitting him with your best punch, getting Jaden Mayava really comfortable really early. I think, getting Makai Lemon comfortable in a game against a big opponent is really important. Like you said, like he was, kind of USC's X factor in this last game against Iowa. You don't want what happened against Notre Dame and what happened against Nebraska to happen in this game. Like you want Makai Lemon to be really firing on all cylinders, rack up a bunch of catches. And I think also that brings the benefit of figuring out early, like, are you going to go to Makai Lemon? Like, are you going to be able to do that? Is he kind of dissecting this Oregon defense, which is the number 1 pass defense in the country, by the way? Or like, is Oregon's defense like really putting a lot of attention on Makai Lemon? Because that could open up a lot for Jacoby Lane, especially because like Oregon, like if Oregon is really paying a lot of attention to Makai in the slot, that probably means that like both of their high safeties, if they're playing a 2 high safety look, are going to be paying a lot of attention to Makai. So it opens up a lot of one-on-ones for Jacoby Lane. And then, I think something I saw on Max Brown, the former USC quarterback, his YouTube channel today, is that like the one like route that Oregon really struggles to cover is like routes that, go to the outside. So they start in and then they go out towards the sideline. So especially if like Makai is getting a lot of attention in the slot, the safety's getting pulled towards him, then Jacoby Lane can go one-on-one and go to the outside, and that'll be really successful for USC. So I just think feeling that out will be really important. But obviously, just like any game in the Big Ten, you got to establish the run too. So it's got to be balanced like it has been all year. But yeah, there's a lot to feel out, I think, early. And so those are kind of the strategies I want to see USC employ when they start the game.
I absolutely agree with everything you guys are saying. I think just really trying to make Dante more uncomfortable, and maybe he just struggles early, I think it will really just help USC, especially with your idea, Ethan, of USC deferring and kicking off to start the game. And I've always been of the mindset, I don't care whether your offensive coach, defense, your offense is leading, defense is better. I've always been, you want to kick that ball off to start the game if you win that toss. I've just looked at it as, especially going into the second half, you want to have that opening kickoff there to start out strong and maybe possibly get 1 extra possession in. So I hope they kick off for that reason, but I think just making Dante more uncomfortable. And then obviously, like you said, Ethan, offensively getting Mayava comfortable and letting Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane get their reps and really just, dominate there. But then also, like you said, King Miller needs to get his runs in, especially if Wayman Jordan is out, which is seeming likely. But like you said earlier in the show, if Lincoln Riley is trying to be all sneaky with how he's managing Jordan to keep Oregon off guard, it's definitely worth keeping an eye on Jordan during warmups. Like, does he end up putting his pads on? Does he run out with the team? Like, what's he doing in warmups? So it's going to be very interesting to monitor Jordan as well, especially in the slight chance that he is back, because that is a huge boost to USC's run game, which USC will definitely need to utilize regardless of whether or not he is available.
All right, so let's turn to play selection and the game plan on offense. King Miller's been great, no question about it. But like USC's running game, with the injuries on the offensive line, with the injuries to the running back room, like this running game has not been in a position to max out. And against Iowa, it was mostly Maava throwing to Makai Lemon, and Makai Lemon making a Biletnikoff Award level display in the Coliseum. And part of the Makai Lemon storyline is that Ethan referenced the Notre Dame and Nebraska games. Well-schooled defenses, but also those games were on the road. So like we need to see Makai Lemon away from the Coliseum play like an alpha, play like a big dog, like that, and if you want the Biletnikoff Award, you need to go into Autzen and you need to make a statement if you're Makai Lemon. So obviously the personal awards matter less than team success, but personal excellence is going to feed into team success for Makai Lemon. But my larger point is, and once again, we get into this situation where, the USC fan base, I think in their heart of hearts, would want to run the ball first and foremost with King Miller, but I think this might be a throw game. And Oregon has a highly rated secondary, but I think you have to hit Oregon in that secondary. You're going to have to make big plays. You're going to have to go into the belly of the beast. This is a big boy challenge. I think the past we tend to think of the running game as like the test of manhood, but I think in this game the passing game is the test of manhood. Your two electric playmakers, Makai Lemon, Jacoby Lane, they're receivers. They both need to be great. They both need to be at their best. We can't have the Jacoby Lane drop passes that we saw against Notre Dame and Makai Lemon. If you are a top 10 NFL draft pick, you got to school your man. You got to win your battles. You got to go click clack and get the job done. So, to me, the test of manhood is not brute strength up front. It's more of throw it, and our dudes are faster. Our dudes are going to get the 50-50 balls. Our dudes are going to, be, they're going to win plays in the air. Because even when USC's running game has not been amazing, the pass protection has been very consistent. That's part of the success story of this offensive line under Zach Hansen. So, Ethan, I know that USC, the school that brought us student body right, most fans want to run the damn ball, but I think you have to establish the downfield pass in this game.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. I think that you talked about a test of manhood, right? And the manhood is, can you be the man on the road? Can you be the same big dog that you look like in the Coliseum on the road? And it's equal fold for Makai Lemon as it is for Jaden Maava. I was really surprised to see kind of the discrepancy in Maava's stats, because he played pretty well in his first two road games against Purdue and against Illinois, barring that one interception and then that one bad drive against the Illini. But 14 touchdowns and 2 interceptions at home, 4 touchdowns and 4 interceptions on the road. So he's a different guy. He has a couple of games where he hasn't thrown for a single touchdown on the road. He's thrown an interception in every road game except for Purdue. So, it's a little bit different. And we talked about last year, obviously Maava's biggest weakness was he would get into his own head because he had a lot of talent. But he would kind of panic a little bit, and then he'd go through these really rough stretches where he threw interceptions on back-to-back drives and stuff like that. So I think, and then I think that kind of showed up against Nebraska, which was his worst game this year, which was that he never kind of got out of this rut, at least throwing the ball. He impacted the game running the ball, ended up helping USC win that way. But never really kind of got out of his own head, got out of the rut throwing the ball, save for a couple of throws there at the end. Here and there. But yeah, I think that'll be really important. You want to see, these guys be able to take that game up to Oregon and not just, kind of take a step back like they've done in road games similarly. So yeah, that's really important. One note I'd make about the run game is it felt like in this last game against Iowa, we saw Brian Jackson get back to the back that we kind of thought he was going to be this year, which, with the injuries, you would think that they would still be giving him more carries. Like they're still not giving him a lot of carries, but his role as the number 3 back coming into the year was supposed to be they give him the ball near the goal line and he powers it into the end zone after, Wayman Jordan and Eli Sanders get them down the field. So that to me suggests that he's probably closer to full health. And also, that's kind of a role that USC could use him in this game, probably not only near the end zone, but on those, 3rd and short, potential 4th and short situations, which I'd feel a lot more confident handing the ball to Brian Jackson on 4th and 1 than throwing a screen pass to the tight end behind the line of scrimmage, cough, cough, Notre Dame. So, maybe we'll be seeing a little bit of that in this game.
Matt, I think your idea of starting just with the passing game, I think is really crucial. Yeah, we think of the Big Ten. We think of big boy football. We think you've got to run the damn ball. But USC's power punch is its passing game, especially when you look at having Lemon and Lane as arguably 2 of the best receivers in the country. You got to take advantage of your weapons. So I think definitely that's not to say you don't utilize the run game. And I think Ethan makes a great point of Brian Jackson just being the guy to be the dude who just gets the ball into the end zone when you're inside the 5 to get the job done. I think that was really smart. I really like those plays where they had him run in 2 touchdowns there kind of in the end zone. I think one was even a wildcat play, if I recall correctly. And so,
yep.
And so, yeah, I think that's a really smart play to use Jackson in that regard. But I think really you got to start with the run game or the pass game, pardon me, and really just utilize your top 2 receivers to make sure they're eating, make sure they're doing their jobs and really, proving their test of manhood, especially on the road against a ranked team like you guys have been saying. But then also you do need to use the run game and mix it in there, especially with how good King Miller has been this year, especially just going on insane runs. So really it's, I think, got to go heavy on the pass, but definitely do mix some run in there for the offense.
All right, we're going to talk about the defense pretty soon, but we're going to round out the offensive side of the ball for USC in this game by talking about Elijah Page. So been battling the injuries. We don't know if he's going to be playing this coming weekend, but the offensive line has held together well. And again, Zach Hansen, rock star, like the best story on this coaching staff this season. So, the backups have been able to do their part. They've been able to hold their own, but now Oregon, biggest game of the season. How are you feeling in terms of this offensive line being able to hold it together if Elijah Page can't play? Ethan, then Crash.
Yeah, I'm still feeling pretty good. I think it's one of those situations where, like, until I see otherwise, like I'm feeling pretty confident. Like USC's had Jean-Ray Reed come in and play pretty well. They've had Kalon Miller come in and play pretty well. And when they move, Tobias Raymond to the left tackle and they put Miller in at left guard. And yeah, Micah Banuelos plays pretty well. Like they just there's so many players who have seen the field for USC at that position that have played well. So I'm pretty confident that, they'll put up a good fight. I think, if it doesn't go so well, because Oregon has a pretty tough defensive line and they have a pretty tough secondary. So they're going to make Maiava work to find the open man. So if he's, waiting a second extra and, guys are getting in the backfield because of that. I hope that we see Maiava, use his legs in this game a little bit more, especially a little bit more improvisationally, because that could make it to where, even if the offensive line doesn't have the best game ever, it's not necessarily a total disaster, because, he's done pretty well when he's been entrusted to do that. So, and, that could be the formula to success, especially if, because I think like worst case scenario for Maiava in this game is like, it's feeling a lot like Nebraska. Like he's just not getting anything going, throwing the football. So, maybe making that pivot a little bit earlier and trying to use his legs a little more earlier on in the game would be good to see. So yeah, I think I'd definitely like to see him do that for sure.
Matt, I think when you talk about just Elijah Page, you have to talk about the whole offensive line in general, because yes, Page is down. And yes, he's been a crucial part of that O-line, arguably maybe the best lineman that USC has this year. But even still, like we've said, and it's a credit to Zach Hansen, the offensive line coach for how he's managed to keep these guys gelling and make sure they're still playing well, even when one of them goes down. It's just like you just slot someone else in there. Maybe you move a couple pieces around, slot another guy in somewhere else. But for the most part, this line has held up pretty well. And I'm pretty confident, especially with how this line looked against Iowa, especially in that second half where they were just, really just allowing Maiava to have the time that he needed to make the plays he wanted to make. And obviously, too, I think, like you said, Ethan, Oregon has a great secondary. So Maiava will need that time. I'm not worried about that. But still, even in the event that he can't find open receivers and it's not really planned to be you hand it off to King Miller or Brian Jackson, I still would like to see Maiava use his legs. This is another game where having that other element of a rushing game would be very beneficial to USC. So I really do hope to see that as well, even if, regardless, especially if the O-line does give Maiava the time that he needs.
All right, on the other side, we're going to talk about the USC defense against the Oregon offense. But first, a word from our sponsor. We'll see you in a minute.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click Join, and then select a betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
And we remind you that you can catch Mark Rogers' national Voice of College Football show 6 nights a week, Monday through Saturday. I had the pleasure of guest hosting the Monday night show. I took calls for 2 hours, so that's on the YouTube and the World Wide Webs. If you want to catch me just fielding calls for 2 hours, hey, that's out there. So but again, Mark Rogers' national show, 6 nights a week, Monday through Saturday, 10 p.m. in the East, 7 p.m. in the West, here at the Voice of College Football. And in terms of how you can help the USC channel, the caps, the camo, there's the camo. Ethan's modeling the camo cap, shirts, coffee mugs, tumblers, lots of other forms of merchandise. So vocfb.com/shop. And when you get caps with the USC brand, underneath the VOCFB logo, USC apparel supports the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. And of course, the other way you can support the channel, you go to our YouTube homepage, USC at the Voice of College Football. So it's right there in the middle of the screen, the subscribe button, the join button. So you click the join button, you get that pop-up, join at the middle Heisman tier, the top national champion tier. You get exclusive insider access to the bonus cuts. Get your fork and knife. And, if you're a member, just spread the word. Tell your friends about the perks of being a member of the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. Get the exclusive insider access to the bonus segments that myself, Ethan, and Crash Like Collier are cranking out. I think we have about 15, 16, something like that. It's around there. And we're going to keep creating more and more segments as we go along on the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. But that's how you can support the channel, as well as, of course, super chats as well. All right, so now more on the defense. Now we already talked a little bit about the game plan. Load the box, make Dante Moore beat you. But one of the bigger storylines, as both of you are very much aware of, is that D'Anton Lynn has talked about the youthfulness of this defense. Bringing guys along. It's been a slow learning curve. Hasn't happened all at once. But now, here we are, second half of November, right? Like, freshmen shouldn't be freshmen anymore. Now they should be grown up. Like, and here we go, a championship style game, a playoff style game, should we have that absolute expectation that the young pups are ready to be big dogs? Or do we go into this game saying, it's great if they play well, but it's still kind of a learning process and we'll get them next year. Obviously you have a huge game right in front of you now. Just where's your expectation level? Like, of course they should play a complete game. It's about time for them to play a complete game. Or do we say, you know what, they're young, they've had injuries, it's great if they max out, but I'm not going to expect too much. How do you kind of thread the needle between aspirational and realistic, Ethan, then Crash?
I think I fall like a little bit somewhere in the middle. Like I think, I want to see them go all out, and that's on a coaching staff and a player perspective. Like I want to see all out effort. I want to see like them trying stuff. If it doesn't work, them not worrying about seniority, like put the best players on the field. If somebody's struggling, put them on the bench and replace them with somebody else because there's a lot of talent on this team, right? Like there's a lot of guys they can try. There's a lot of guys who have had their moments. Like, you never know who's going to have their best game on any given day. So, as long as I think that the most frustrating outcome would be, Oregon continuing to go back to the well and running in between the tackles, or, throwing really simple passes and USC continuing to play soft coverage and them just not making any adjustments and, hoping that eventually the strategy was going to work out for them and then it doesn't. Like that's, to me, is the worst case disaster scenario. Like if they, put their very best foot forward and they fall a little short, or, they're beaten by an all-time game from Dante Moore, then like, I think you can live with it. It's because of the youth, like you talked about, and because, there is like hey, we can turn around and put a better product on the field next year. And these guys have shown flashes. Let's make them more consistent this offseason. But I do think that like they need to, now's not the time to be conservative. Like it's time to throw every wrench you have in the toolbox at Oregon. And it's time to play like your football pants are on fire, because, this is the most important road game that USC's played in a really long time. One of the most important USC games in a couple decades, probably. So, this means a lot, to the team. It means a lot to Lincoln Riley. It means a lot to the whole coaching staff. It means a lot to the fans. It means a lot to the university, to the alums, to the students. Like there are, thousands and thousands of people to who this game means a great deal to. And so to see anything less than their best effort would be the disappointing thing. And that's from a coaching staff and a player perspective.
So I get, obviously, they're freshmen, and I know everyone is, especially with freshmen, you preach patience a lot. And I do get that. Like, you know what? They're freshmen. They're getting used to the college game. You know what? There is a learning curve. There's no denying that. But when you're 8-2 and your college football playoff dreams are on the line, no one's going to care about that anymore. Patience is great. If, things aren't going so well, you can kind of preach patience a little bit. And I'm not saying that, if USC was struggling a bit more, maybe it dropped a game or two, and they weren't in the position they were right now, I could get them preaching patience with these guys. But you can't do that when you're 8-2, and this is in many ways a playing game to the CFP. It's time that you got to, live up to the expectations of the standard of USC and go out and just turn them loose. Got, like Ethan said, throw everything you got at them. So I really think that you can't use the patience excuse with this big a game on the line. Now, obviously, I'm hoping a lot of them have developed well, and I think staying patient with them, even through some of those tough circumstances earlier, can help. But if they're not showing if they're not living up to their potential on Saturday, you got to get them out of there, get someone else in who will get the job done. So really, I think it's about the patience thing. You can use that. You can use that in kind of these years when you got a younger team, younger guys, until you're in these situations where it really counts, and your season is kind of on the line. You're in a doer. It's kind of in many ways Eugene or bust, CFP on the line. Like you got to throw everything at it and make sure it works. So there's going to be, I don't think USC. I don't think fans can be patient this weekend if things don't go well.
Yeah, so our friend, loyal viewer, Bob Springer mentions can't have defensive tackles being pushed 5 to 10 yards off the ball. And this brings up a point from the Notre Dame game, Ethan Inman, where Lincoln Riley, after the Notre Dame game, said, it wasn't really about physicality. We weren't lined up, weren't in the right spots. We all remember that. And I think he was trying to not throw his players under the bus. Like he didn't want to say like, oh, we just got our butts kicked. You want to say, oh, no, it was about technique. It was about positioning. I think he wanted to kind of save his players and not, rake them over the coals. Is that distinction relevant in a game like this, Ethan? Like, is this a scheme game I made the point on when USC has the ball, when USC's on offense, the manhood's going to be Makai and Jacoby winning one-on-one battles and just owning the skies, owning the air against the Ducks. But on defense, yeah, the battle for manhood is in the trenches. It is up front. It's about USC establishing a brick wall so that Dante Moore is going to have to throw over the top. You're not going to run right through us. Is it about scheme? Is it about just showing up and delivering the toughness and the consistency that has been missing in the first 20 minutes of games? Not in second halves, but certainly in the first 20 minutes of games. Scheme versus strength. How do you see it, Ethan? And then Crash.
Yeah, I mean, I think strength certainly matters a lot in this game. It feels like it's been a long time since we've kind of had one of those dominant defensive line performances that we were seeing at the beginning of the season with USC racking up several sacks. And that's, because of the youth of this defensive line. And it's because of, the opponents have gotten better and all that stuff, of course. But Dante Moore has had kind of his worst games when he gets put under pressure. I mean, the only game he's thrown multiple interceptions was against Indiana, and Indiana sacked him 6 times. So, and then the only other game he was sacked more than once was against Wisconsin, and that was his worst statistical game of the season. Obviously, he ended up leaving that one a little bit early with injury. But still, if you can bother Dante Moore in the backfield, he's not as good. So, that especially on passing downs, getting into the backfield, that physicality is going to really become important. And yeah, I'd kind of challenge the defensive line to step up and have one of the games like they were having in the beginning of the season. In running situations, I think scheme does matter. I think, it has come down a lot of times to, USC's linebackers just being in the wrong spot. We've kind of brought that up over and over and over again. Desmond Stevens, Jaden Walker, all these guys who are young linebackers on this team, they're a lot of fun to watch when they're playing well. But when they're not, they're really, really frustrating to watch. And so I do think that scheme is going to come in really important, in that sense, especially because, if Kamari Ramsey is out, you're probably looking at a situation where Desmond Stevens has to wear the green dot again, which was kind of something that was not working out for USC in the beginning of the season. It gives him something extra to think about, other than just his assignment. So I think that scheme is going to matter a lot, and them coaching him up and them, kind of balancing him being confident, but also them sort of, him relying and falling back on, what they've taught him and on how to read the game and all that stuff. So I'd say in the pass game, it's going to be a lot about physicality, and it's, about because I think that's the case, especially because the corners have improved and the safeties have improved and the pass coverage has improved. I'm not as concerned about them completely busting coverages anymore. We haven't seen that too much. So I think it's more about physicality there, but it's definitely about scheme in the run game, because when the linebackers are not in the right spot, that's when Oregon's going to be able to rip off these 20-yard runs that are just going to make us want to pull our hair out. So
I think scheme is certainly part of it for sure. You can't rule it at 0, but I think it's kind of strength. I think it's just kind of how physical, how dominant can USC's defense be in those first 20 minutes, like you said, because that's been the issue last 2 games. It was painfully obvious against that Iowa game. That game had me concerned because of the strength of Iowa's defense, of just how Iowa's offense, or just not so much the strength, but how much how Iowa was able to do whatever they wanted in those 20 minutes. So really, it's about USC, I think, just having to go out there and just impose their will on the Ducks. So that's really why I think it's more kind of strength and just kind of just trying to overpower Dante Moore and the Ducks offense early to start the game.
All right, let's do what we don't often do, but I think for a big game like this, let's go deeper into the weeds. Self-scout. And when I think of self-scouting, I think of one of the unfortunate moments of Pete Carroll's coaching career, the pass at the end of Super Bowl 49 against the Patriots, because Malcolm Butler and Bill Belichick realized that when the Seattle used a bunch formation or a stack formation near the goal line, that meant it was a slant. It was an in-breaking route. And so if Pete Carroll had self-scouted, say how is the defense going to play this formation near the goal line when we show it? If he had done the self-scout, it would have been fake inward and then go out to the pylon. And Seattle might have had back-to-back Super Bowl championships. Also, they just could have run Marshawn Lynch as well. But Pete Carroll failed to self-scout. So when we think about the chess match here in this game, and we think about D'Anton Lynn going against Will Stein, the offensive coordinator for Oregon, Ethan Inman, if you're Will Stein, not looking at this from D'Anton Lynn's point of view, but if you're Will Stein and you're looking at this USC defense and you're trying to do the self-scout of how you think USC's defense is going to attack you, where do you think Will Stein is going to go early in this game with his line of attack, with his game plan to try to expose USC? Is it going to be as simple as, hey, we run the ball, you need to prove you can stop us? Or is it a matter of giving Dante Moore some easy throws, getting him established, and then, from an Oregon perspective, then USC's defense is going to be completely at the mercy of what Will Stein and Oregon want to do? So do you just slam it up the gut right away if you're Oregon scouting this USC defense, or is the priority to make Dante Moore feel comfortable and trust that the running game will then come in behind him, and then you have all the pieces working? Looking at this chess match from the Oregon point of view, Ethan, and then Crash, how do you think this is going to go early for the Ducks offense?
I think, kind of going back to what I said about USC and stacking the box and really trying to stop the run. I think, generally, if you're Oregon's offense, you probably want to start out running a good bit of play action, because that worked for Iowa in early in that game. That was part of why they were able to throw the ball so well, is they kind of played off of their reputation, like, USC expects us to run the ball, so let's pull it out of Kamari Moulton's gut and then have Mark Gronowski make a long throw that no one's expecting. So I think that that's part of it. I think that they'll run a good bit of play action. I think also, but to run play action, you have to establish the run, which I think that they'll try to do, because, take, basically like the least path of resistance to winning this game. Like if USC is going to give you 8-yard runs every play, just take them. But anyway, so those two things. And then I think, in the passing game, we've talked about how there's probably going to be injuries. There's the possibility that Bishop Fitzgerald is out. Test whoever, if there is guys who are not normal starters in the secondary, I would anticipate them going and testing them really early. Testing Kennedy Urlacher if he's in there, testing Christian Pierce if he's in there. If they have injuries at corner again, which it doesn't sound like they do, but Braylon Conley started last game. I think it was probably something disciplinary for DeCarlos Nicholson. But, if Braylon Conley's out there, test him early, test USC's younger guys early, because those are the guys who have been making a lot of the mistakes, and it's USC's veteran players who have played consistently well. So that's what I would anticipate them to do. On the flip side, the challenge for USC becomes they're not just their defense starting fast, but their young defensive players being ready to, kind of have the ball come their way really quickly and really early. Because I think that that's probably what I would anticipate Oregon trying to do.
I think Oregon's probably going to start the game out running. I think we talked about it earlier. Dante Moore sometimes isn't the most consistent passer. And especially with just how USC has looked sometimes, especially strong running backs, be able to get right through the D line, through the linebacker room, an area we have, talked a lot about on this show. So I think even if USC does crowd the box, I don't think Will Stein's going to be afraid to just try to run it up the gut and just see what Oregon can do, and then see how USC defends it, and then lets Dante Moore maybe let loose and throw after, maybe he has USC wobbling a bit and confused about what's going to happen. So I think for USC, it's a lot of emphasis got to be on the run game, Oregon's run game, because that's probably what they're going to start out with, especially when you factor in just how Dante Moore has looked when he's thrown, especially at the start of games, but then also just how USC's defense has looked, especially in the recent weeks.
All right. X factors or key players that you're going to watch for. One player who really did make his presence known last week against Iowa, who hasn't been a regular part of the whole puzzle for the USC defense, but he's a guy who's emerging. Kennedy Urlacher. Ethan mentioned him earlier. That's a possible X factor. Which kind of X factor players, offense or defense, are you looking for in this game? Ethan, then Crash.
Yeah, starting on the defensive side of the ball, Jeff makes a good note here that Christian Pierce ended up wearing the green dot after Kamari Ramsey went out. I didn't know that, so good way to pay attention, Jeff, and thanks for noting that for us. I mean, Christian Pierce played really well against Iowa. I believe he tied for the team lead in tackles at the safety spot. He's a real aggressive player, a real aggressive tackler. And, if he went out and had one of his best games while having to kind of juggle the responsibility of wearing the green dot, that's a great sign, because it means that, he's able to make an impact even when he's having to, kind of handle that extra responsibility and that extra mental side of the game. So if he can come out and have a real strong game for USC, set a physical tone, make some of those first down saving tackles that we saw him and Kennedy Urlacher make in this game, then that'd be really great and really exciting. On the offensive side of the ball, I think it'll be really interesting to see, how USC involves its tight ends. I know Iowa really kind of keyed in on Walker Lyons in this last game because of, how great of a blocker Walker Lyons has been, and how, USC's kind of been really effective in those tight end sets. So, is Oregon going to do something similar? Or are they going to kind of try to, pay a lot of attention to USC's tight ends, or, are they going to be so wrapped up in USC's receivers that the tight ends are able to spring free? I'm not sure, but either way, they're going to come in really key. And I think, Lake McCree, especially as someone who's been up to Eugene before, he's, one of the guys who was on the roster in 2023 when they went up there and, ended up losing to Bo Nix in Oregon in that game. So, he's kind of one of the players on the offense who's more seasoned, has, that more experience, has made that trip before. So, if other guys are struggling early, I definitely look to him to kind of be the rock that kind of steadies the offense, and Mayava and everybody else who, could potentially be taken out of this game with some nerves. So those are my two guys.
I think for me, an X factor is going to be Desmond Stevens. I think just with how he's been in the linebacker room, someone's going to need to step up in that room besides Eric Gentry. So I'm going to look to him on the defensive side, especially if Oregon comes out in full force with the run game to kick off the matchup. And then on the offensive side, I'm honestly looking towards Tanuk Hines, kind of as that third option for USC. And that's not to say that I don't think Jaden Mayava's primary targets should obviously be Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane. We all know that. But I think at some point, and for a lot of the game, those guys are going to be heavily targeted. Oregon's going to probably, I've said this a lot, teams would rather, double team those guys and let someone else beat them than let Lemon or Lane be scoring touchdowns all day. So I think Tanuk Hines has got to be ready to be open, especially in events that Lemon and Lane are heavily covered. So I'm going to really look to Tanuk Hines in the receiver room to really step up as that third option for Mayava.
All right, and no account of this game, and obviously we're coming at you with our post-game show of this coming Sunday, 5 p.m. in the West, 8 p.m. in the East, as we always do. So we'll see where we are on Sunday when we meet you for the post-game show. But going into this game, we can't talk about the subtext and the backdrop to this game without dealing with the coaching staff. And a lot of good comments in the chat from Jeff Rodriguez and Bob Springer, about, hey, make adjustments sooner. Be willing to mix it up early. Don't wait 20 minutes, all right? Don't wait until halftime. I mean, halftime adjustments, if you're down 14, 17 points, aren't going to matter that much, or at least they're not likely to matter. You got to find ways to get this team to perform early. And the talking point, guys, it's just D'Anton Lynn and Rob Ryan have had very bumpy rides this season. And D'Anton Lynn has shown an ability to get it done at halftime in recent weeks, but this has not been nearly as steady a set of performances as we saw last year when the defense carried the team. It's been more difficult this season. Not that there haven't been reasons for it, the injuries, the youth, things that D'Anton Lynn has talked about, but it has been an uneven journey. So before this game starts, we don't know what's going to happen, but what's your sense of how important this game is in terms of how we assess D'Anton Lynn and also Rob Ryan at USC? How much are you putting into this game in terms of evaluating their overall job performance? And there's the temptation to make everything about one game, and you have to look at the greater body of work, but this one game is a very big game, and for most USC fans, it's the game that's going to define this season and how it's remembered. So maybe the question is, how are you balancing the short term in this one really huge game versus the big picture, the whole body of work, and the ramp up to a very important 2026 season at USC, Ethan, and then Crash?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing that we don't want to see is just regression. It feels like there's been real improvement on the defensive side of the ball. And I think, this game is not a disaster. Even if it's not USC's best game, as long as they've clearly taken a step forward since Notre Dame. If Oregon puts up a bigger number than Notre Dame and, USC's defense just kind of lays down and dies, then I think that there's reason to be frustrated. And then there's reason to kind of use that singular game, that singular performance as kind of the defining factor for the whole season. If USC loses and, the defense doesn't play an A+ game, but it's at least better, then I think we can all kind of take a look at the bigger picture, make sure that we kind of are thinking about, how USC played against Nebraska, played against Northwestern, played against Iowa, and then, inevitably how they play against UCLA and, in the bowl game. Hopefully it's a playoff game and not just, some random bowl game that doesn't matter. But, they're going to play in some sort of postseason game that we don't know about yet. So, just we can consider the whole big picture as long as this game isn't like a regression to Notre Dame or worse. But if it is, then I think this game is going to reverberate for a long time and they're going to have to answer for it.
I think there's certainly a bit of both. Obviously, if there's significant regression in this game, you really have to factor that in. But even still, I think you got to really look at the whole body of work from this defense, in particular the linebacker room, especially as we've talked about before. There was Eric Gentry was not playing the final 2/3 of the season, and yet that linebacker room was better under Matt Entz. And obviously there have been injuries, younger guys, but it seems like even if there's improvement, you still just have to assess the whole body of work. Now, like you said, Ethan, I think even if it's looking better, USC plays respectably, I think you definitely got to factor that in, but I don't think you can just hang everything on the Oregon game. You got to look at the whole picture and just how much of an improvement or how much of a regression is it? So really that's what I'm looking for as I go to assess the defense as we head to the conclusion of the regular season.
Well, I'm going to offer the final note for this show, and it's simply this. And it's something I've said before, so it's not that this is not something new for me, okay? You can play a mediocre ball and win because your opponent's worse, and you can play great and get beaten because your opponent sets a lofty standard. And what I want to see from this game is if Oregon plays a great game and you give it your all and you fight to the end and you make Oregon earn every last ounce of the victory, tip the cap, congratulate Dan Lanning, and move on. But Illinois did not play a great game against USC. Notre Dame did not play a great game against USC. Losing when your opponent is less than great, that's what really hurts. That's when you have the sleepless nights. That's when you have the off season of what ifs and very painful memories about how the win, the achievement, the glory was right there, but you couldn't take it because you stepped on a rake. You fell short. If Oregon plays a great game and wins, fine. Like none of us are going to be cursing the darkness about the Oregon game in the offseason. We're going to be cursing the Illinois game instead. If Oregon does not play a great game and USC cannot at least, go down to the final seconds and make Oregon sweat, that's going to leave a pit in my stomach. That's going to make me feel empty and barren. So if Oregon plays great, that's one thing. But if Oregon is begging USC to win this game and the Trojans can't take it, that's going to be the outcome I will not be able to accept or tolerate. So make Oregon play great to beat you. Make Oregon be excellent, strive for excellence, and Lincoln Riley's USC, play a complete 60-minute road game against a good team. We have never seen that with our eyes. None of us. Not Jeff Rodriguez, not Bob Springer, not Ethan, not Crash, not myself. Just once as a treat. Lincoln, and Lincoln, you have that chip on your shoulder. You're breathing fire at ESPN College Game Day. Your shoulder. You want to translate that chip on your shoulder into an elite performance and a win? Finally, this is your moment. This is the time. The table is set. It's time for a conquest in Eugene. All right, folks. We'll see you Sunday, 5 p.m. in LA and the West, 8 p.m. in the East for Oregon Postgame Live here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. Where will we be, and where will this USC team be? We find out Saturday on CBS, and for a day game, it's a 12:30 Pacific kick, 3:30 for our friends in the East. It's go time, the biggest game for USC football and Lincoln Riley since the 2022 Pac-12 championship game against Utah. Where will we be on Sunday? Well, we're going to see you at 5 p.m. in LA, and who knows what we're going to be talking about. So for Ethan Inman and Crashlet Collier, this is Matt Zemek. Fight on, beat the Ducks. This is it, go time. We'll see you on Sunday, and we hope you enjoy the game, because if you do, that means